Lucas had always been an ordinary boy, but his life began to unravel when nightmares started to haunt him. At first, they were merely disturbing dreams, but soon they morphed into terrifying experiences. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind transported him to a dark place where shadows danced and threatening whispers filled the air. He tried to ignore them, but reality became increasingly unbearable. What had once been mere dreams now felt like a prison from which he could not escape. On a stormy night, with the sky streaked with lightning and the wind howling, Lucas had the worst nightmare of his life. He found himself in a long, dark corridor, the walls covered in a viscous, foul-smelling substance. Echoes of distant laughter quickly turned into screams of despair. He tried to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Desperation surged as a hooded figure emerged before him. Its eyes burned like embers, and Lucas felt a paralyzing terror. He attempted to scream, but his voice was lost in the darkness. The nightmares continued, each night becoming an exhausting struggle. He saw himself being chased by deformed creatures, plunging into bottomless abysses, and facing unimaginable horrors. Fatigue forced him to avoid sleep, but the need for rest made him succumb. Over time, Lucas began to research these disturbing dreams, finding an online forum where others shared similar experiences. A woman named Renata caught his attention. She mentioned a place called Worlds of Nightmares, where dreams became reality and the deepest fears manifested. Desperate to understand what was happening, Lucas decided to enter this world. He followed a ritual Renata taught him, involving meditation and the repetition of a magical phrase. That night, as he repeated the words, his mind floated into darkness, and he found himself in a gloomy desert, the sky tinged with red. The air was cold, and a suffocating sense of despair enveloped him. He knew he needed to find a way out, but the creatures that had pursued him in dreams were now closer, more real. With each step he took, shadows crawled around him, and he felt their hungry eyes watching him. The feeling of being watched was terrifying, but he remembered Renata and that there was a guardian who protected the exit. To find him, Lucas needed to confront his own fears and nightmares. He began to traverse the desert, facing each of his horrors in turn. The dark corridor haunted him once more, but this time, he was determined to confront the hooded figure. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling. The figure smiled, revealing a distorted, grotesque face. "I am what you fear, what you avoid. To leave, you must confront me." Lucas did not back down. He fought against his shadows, confronting each echo of despair. He realized that the only way to win was to accept his fear and recognize it as part of himself. As he did so, the shadows began to dissipate, and the figure dissolved into a cloud of smoke. After facing his nightmares, Lucas finally found the guardian of fear, an immense creature enveloped in an aura of darkness. Its eyes were empty holes, but Lucas felt no fear. He felt peace in realizing he had faced the horrors that had tormented him. "You had the courage to confront your fears," said the guardian. "Now, you must face your greatest fear." Lucas hesitated, thinking about what truly terrified him. The answer hit him like lightning: loneliness. He had always feared being alone, with no one to support him. Suddenly, Lucas found himself in an empty room with no doors or windows. The silence was deafening, and loneliness wrapped around him like a heavy cloak. He screamed for help, but his voice echoed unanswered. Despair began to take hold of him, but in the midst of his desperation, he remembered who he truly was. He began to speak aloud, affirming his strength and certainty that he was not alone. "I have people who love me," he shouted. The moment he uttered those words, the walls began to fade, and light began to shine. He was once again before the Guardian. "What you did was brave," said the Guardian. "Now you can choose to return to your world or stay here and be consumed by your fears." Lucas, now filled with determination, replied, "I want to go back. I want to live." With those words, the Guardian extended a long, shadowy hand. Lucas touched it. He felt a wave of energy coursing through his body. The darkness around him began to fade, and he felt himself being pulled into the light. When Lucas awoke, he was in his bed, his heart racing, but feeling lighter than ever. He looked out the window and saw the rising sun. The world seemed new and full of possibilities. The nightmares would still haunt him, but he knew he had the tools to face them. Over time, he began to share his experiences, helping others confront their own nightmares. But as the light of day intensified, Lucas did not realize that the Guardian was still lurking. As he lived his life, the echoes of the night never completely disappeared. The shadows he had faced in the world of nightmares still lingered, waiting for an opportunity to return. Lucas felt safe during the day, but as night fell, fear began to seep back into his heart. He tried to distract himself, but every time he closed his eyes, the images of his nightmares returned with renewed ferocity. One night, while trying to sleep, Lucas heard a familiar whisper. It was a soft, yet threatening voice. "You cannot escape me, Lucas." He got up, breath quickening. The darkness in his room felt thicker. The shadows moved menacingly. "I faced you before," he shouted. The voice laughed, echoing through the room. "You only won a battle, not the war." The lights began to flicker, and Lucas felt a familiar presence closing in. He tried to run, but the darkness trapped him. He remembered the Guardian and how he had overcome his fears, but now he was trapped again in a nightmare. The creatures from the desert emerged, and he realized he could not escape. In a final effort, he focused, trying to summon the light that had freed him before, but nothing happened. What he did not know was that by entering the world of nightmares, he had made a dark pact. The darkness would never leave him in peace. The presence of the Guardian grew, enveloping Lucas in a thick haze. He tried to scream, but the sound was lost in silence. He realized that no matter how much he had faced his fears, there was a part of him that always longed for that darkness, a part that would never truly let him be free. In the last moment of clarity, Lucas understood that the true battle was not against the external shadows, but against the ones that dwelled within his own heart. And so, Lucas became yet another lost soul in the world of nightmares, echoing in eternal darkness as his voice joined the chorus of despair, promising that one day others would also confront their own shadows. The cycle would continue, and the Guardian of Fear waited patiently for his next victim, ready to ensnare another heart in darkness. Nights would go on, with new nightmares emerging and souls being devoured, while Lucas's story became just a whisper among the shadows. And somewhere, amidst the silence, the laughter echoed, whispering that the true darkness lies not in the shadows we confront, but in those we choose to ignore.